You can become part of the African View debate. A few people are voting already. We're asking the question, does the portrayal of women in modern society contribute to either the empowerment or victimization? Giving you those two opinions or options rather, empowerment being the first one, second one being victimization. We want to get your thoughts on that one. Become part of the African View debate every Monday. It's coming up just in a few minutes as we debate each side of that. Give us your thoughts. You think the portrayal of women is either empowering or it's victimizing? Go to @Channel Africa 1 on X.
She builds, she leads, she rises. This August, join Channel Africa in celebrating the women who shape our communities, shift narratives, and carve out a future on their own terms.
These women together ought to be able to turn it right again.
From Cape Town to Kigali, Lagos to Lusaka, African women are rewriting the script. Here's to courage, creativity, and unstoppable progress. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Palesa and Benjamin, fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
If you walk into various spaces these days, you'll realize that things look very different than they did 10, 20, 30 years ago, especially when it comes to how women are portrayed. If you open your media sources, whether your favorite media sources, maybe you're watching TV on a daily, maybe you're watching your favorite movie or even music, it's quite different how women are portrayed in media today than what we've seen in the past. And it's beautiful to see that, women are also entering spaces that were previously only, put aside for men. So we're seeing a lot of women CEOs, politicians, scientists, entrepreneurs, not as much as we should in this day and age, but it's definitely been a rise there. In the same breath, there still exists a hypersexualization of women within various spaces, and sometimes maybe an idealization to see only women that we all want to be, but no portrayals of the women that exist in our families, in our communities, and in our everyday spaces. Today on the African View, that is our debate feature here on The Move, we're asking the question on whether the portrayal of women today in modern society contributes to either their empowerment or their victimization. To unpack and be in this debate today, we have Precious Imuwahen, who is a curriculum design expert and writer from Nigeria. We also have Ludwekazi Ndlazi, who is a storyteller and creative strategist from South Africa. Thank you, ladies, both of you, for joining us in today's African View debate. I'm going to start with you, Precious. Thank you so much for your time. Let's find out what your sentiments are and where you stand in today's debate.
Thank you so much for having me. Really thrilled to be here. And something else I'm going to say is I'm quite excited I'm alive in 2025 because there was such a time, especially on our continent, when women didn't have full expression. And by that, I mean, it wasn't very normal growing up to see that the CEO, to see myself, let me use that example, in a lot of the women or in the magazines that were out there, many of us were raised to, take care of the family, have children, get married, etc. However, we now live in a time where there is so much focus on women being empowered. Everyone sees that if you raise a woman, if you give a woman education, you are raising a village. So I do see that there is some serious efforts, to make sure that there is representation, to make sure that women are included in the rooms where decisions are made. Do we have enough of that effort? I'm sure there will be more thoughts around that, but definitely compared to any other time, at least post-colonial history in Africa, because pre-colonial, definitely we had representation. We didn't run patriarchal societies, if you look at history. However, post-colonial has been very patriarchal, especially on our continent. And things are changing very slowly, I must add, but things are changing. Women are being represented, and a lot more women like me, and even women who are now ruling countries across the continent. So there is some improvement, but we want to see more.
Absolutely. And I mean, this debate itself, having two women debate something on a radio show already is a different portrayal of how women were, at least 50 and more years ago. This wouldn't have been a reality back then, but it is a reality now, which I'm grateful for. Ludwekazi, let's come to you. Let's find out your opening sentiments in today's debate.
Thank you so much for having me, Palesa. Hi, Benjamin. Hello, Precious. Oh, this is a very touchy subject, right? And I think I want to start by acknowledging that perhaps where Precious and I will agree is on the fact that patriarchy remains a constant pre- and post-colonial, right? And within the continent, what tends to happen is that when we engage in such conversations, there is a tendency to be excited about what seems as our reality. But when we look at our communities and society, be it in media platforms or just on the ground in terms of our environments where we live, where we work, how we do life on a daily basis, you start to identify these cracks and start to question yourself about how authentic some of these policies are. On paper, they are very strong frameworks that are pro-empowerment of women. But then when you look at our realities on the ground, patriarchy remains consistent, and they are deeply entrenched norms that infiltrate our spaces in the workplace, in the classroom, in institutions that are supposed to uphold some of these values. And for these reasons, it may seem like there continues to be a trend where women are victimized. And sometimes even through these empowerment policies, even through these empowerment initiatives. And some of the work that's done by the United Nations, specifically on women, and within the African continent, question some of these intersectionalities that start to affect how we approach women conversations, discrimination, and where we have come and how far we have come, rather, when it comes to conversations on patriarchy. So I think we appreciate empowerment initiatives, but we really need to be honest about how they truly change the dynamic of how women live in this day and age.
I mean, but how do you attribute that, Ludwekazi, to portrayal in media? Because that's the topic that we are speaking about today. How do your views connect with that aspect?
So I want to use a case study as an example, right? So we have in South Africa this collective of women called Woza Sisi. They are artists who do remarkable work to support artists who are putting out work that reflects the realities of women on the ground, right? And then we recently had a situation where they challenged a well-known, established international brand, an artist himself in his own right, who has done quite remarkable work in the space. But what tends to happen then, when you put a woman against a man, there are systems and patriarchal norms that support the man's point of view. So when we use Woza Sisi's case as an example, you start to see how there's very little support. There's a sense of erasure of women's voices, even in the media. I could mention so many other names just outside of this very recent case where they took this said artist to court to say there's a question of credibility in as far as intellectual property is concerned. So they created an exhibition and they started this beautiful work where they were documenting the journey of women and their authentic stories with regards to their lived experiences. And it would seem there was a case of appropriation and not realizing or recognizing the amount of work that they had put in. And then you get brands that will endorse these said artists. And even when there's a question on credibility, there is no support for the woman. There is no support for the collective. And what we see in the media, be it on digital platforms or on traditional media, is the amplification of the male voice. And that aggression and that dominance and that sense of empowering the men, even when there's a case that's presented where we need to critically engage how far we can go in opening up the conversation on the erasure of work that women do, I think that case study is a perfect example. And what they're doing now is to relaunch their book, which is your book, which really sort of amplifies the voices of these women and reestablish the work that they have done in the space. So I think media plays a very critical role in the support or victimization of women.
All right, Ludwekazi, those are very powerful points that are coming from you. I want to bring them back to Precious. That later point is a very powerful one in terms of appropriating the African woman aesthetic in many brand spaces. And the real African is not really given a voice in terms of them speaking for themselves, but they've been spoken about through that branding lexicon. We'll speak a little bit more about that after our break. We're speaking to Ludwekazi Ndlazi, storyteller and creative strategist who is based in South Africa. We also have Precious Ajoonu, a curriculum design expert and Nigerian writer, who's also joining us. They're both on both sides of this debate that we're having today. What's your take on it? Remember, we have our On the Move poll on our X handle or Twitter handle. Remember, we want to get your thoughts on that one. It's moving slowly, so we want to get your thoughts. Let's move it a little bit faster. We're asking the question, does the portrayal of a woman in modern society contribute to either empowerment or victimization? Give us your thoughts. That handle again at Channel Africa 1 on X.
Nkhanza zokhudza amuna ndi azimayi kapena kuti gender-based violence GBV zikuwononga mioyo komanso kuphwasula midzi. Zikuchitika m'manyumba, m'masukulu, malo ogwirira ntchito ndipo kwambiri mwakachetechete, koma sizikuyenera kupitirira. Mukazimva yankhulani, ngati mwakhuzidwa funani chithandizo, chifukwa kusachita chilichonse sikuthandiza. Mverani kuma wireless onse 14 a SABC kuchokera lachitatu pa 23 mwezi uno wa Julai kuti mumve zokambirana, malangizo, masewero, zionetsero za maphunziro ndi mafunso okhuza nkhanza za amuna ndi azimayi ndi akatswiri, anthu opulumuka ku nkhanzazi, okhazikitsa lamulo komanso dziko lonse lokhuzidwa ndi nkhanzazi. Zonsezi pa wireless yomwe mumayikonda ya SABC. Imbirani pa nambala 0800 428 428 kuti munene za nkhanzazi kapena kupeza chithandizo. Nkhanza zokhuza amuna ndi azimayi zimatha ndi inu. Kutenga ukufikani kuchokera ku SABC.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
The SABC is pleased to announce the launch of the new self-registration platform. Vendors wishing to do business with the SABC can self-register on our internally developed platform. Vendors are able to access this platform on our website www.sabc.co.za/SABC/ under e-tenders or self-register at etenders.sabc.co.za and follow the prompts. Visit SABC social media pages for more details.
Keeping you on the know and on the move.
All right, we continue this conversation with our guests debating this very powerful question about the portrayal of a woman in modern society, whether in media, politics, or culture. Joining us for this one, we're joined by Precious Ajoonu, who is a curriculum design expert and writer in Nigeria. Ludwekazi Ndlazi is a storyteller and a creative strategist here in South Africa. Precious, very strong points from both of you. Starting off this one. What's your take on the fact that there still seems to be a sense that men's voice are still dominating in many sectors of our society and also how we portray women, but also the way we also use that woman image is at times, more of a marketing gimmick than anything else?
Thank you so much. In fact, I was listening to, I'm trying not to pronounce her name wrong, but I was listening to her and I couldn't agree more. However, I think one of the things that would be very useful for us, especially as Africans, is to try and decolonize our history, right? I'm from such a place, I'm Nigerian, but I'm from such a place called the Benin Kingdom. If you do a Google search, you would find us. And you will find that if you look at our history, pre-colonialism, we didn't have patriarchy, right? We had such a thing called not matriarchy, but there was such balanced representation in society where our women went to war, our men went to war. There were female deities, there were male deities. Why am I saying that this is important? If you look at our history, post-colonialization, you find that it's very difficult to situate the African in history. And now I bring it back to where we are now. Because oftentimes when we talk about pre or post, people often say to me, Precious Imuwahen, stop talking about colonization, let's just move forward. The challenges with that is if we look at ourselves in media, whether it's women or whether it's Africans in general, from the lens of what's obtainable in the West, then coming up with proper metrics for us will be very difficult. I do say that, yes, she's right to have said that we still haven't done enough in terms of appropriation. Yes, you will still find the female caretaker image in, in media, etc. However, I do see a significant shift across the continent for proper female representation that is not necessarily tokenism. I do see that. Do we need to do more? Yes. And then another question I have for women like myself, oftentimes when we say they, who are the they that we refer to? Who are these they that we speak of? Because if you look at the population, again, across the continent, you will find that, in some countries, it's either you have slightly more women or just slightly less women, right? So we do have a voice. So perhaps the conversations now have to be around ensuring that a woman with a voice, a girl with a voice, can use that voice so that the they become us, so that the people who will shift some of these traditional paradigms and culture become us. Because again, and then another very tricky conversation, again, around female representation. I'm a feminist, and feminism is pro-equality for everyone. And then another debate sometimes is around what sort of women should we, what sort of images do we want to have in media? What sort of, do we want to have more women around, showing women who are leading communities, showing women who are excelling, like some people say, in male-dominated fields? Or do we just want to show women as women without pressure to be either this or that? Yeah. I would say it's both, but I think that the day that we speak of has to now become more women fighting for women rights. Yes, we appreciate allies, because there is no, we're not going to go very far without our male allies, but we need the day that we speak of to be women.
Yeah. Let me bring it back to you, Ludwekazi. You were speaking about the portrayal, and usually when we speak about portrayal, it wouldn't be, the everyday people in society that have access to do the mainstream portrayals, like in the media, like in social media and other forms. So when we do see those portrayals of women in the media, how can those victimize the everyday women on the ground?
That's a very layered one, Palesa, because I also hold very strong sentiments on the tendency to police women's behavior, right? And we see that a lot in scrutinizing and questioning their preferences. But the thing about trying to create a structural shift is that we cannot be selective about the kind of change that we want to see in our society. There isn't enough data available to give us enough and concrete evidence of how far we have come in creating that shift and really interrogating the impact of these empowerment initiatives. And for that reason, I will almost argue that there is a lot of performative initiatives that exist, window dressing, tokenism that exists, unfortunately. And because our gaze is limited to what we are exposed to sometimes, we may be tempted to think that there is a greater shift in how women are starting to exist in our society. Then with regards to the portrayal of women, the importance is reflecting those different personalities. What tends to happen is that you find there's an archetype, and that archetype will either be amplified or, and that tends to also discriminate on women and representation in that regard. So yes, we need to challenge these norms, right? And particularly relating to our cultural institutions, our religious institutions. These are some of the spaces where women are victimized the most, and our media starts to mirror that reflection. And I think that's a conversation that we should be having in terms of how we can really break down these structural norms and how they're affecting how women exist.
So powerful from both of you. We're going to leave it there, unfortunately, because we want this question to be pending to you, the listener. Give us your insights as well on our X handle at Channel Africa 1 is where to go. And you'll find this question pinned up on our X page. We're asking you, does the portrayal of women in modern society contribute to the woman's empowerment or victimization? Giving you two options, empowerment being the first one and the second one being victimization. We want to get your thoughts on that one. But let's thank our wonderful guests for giving us a compelling debate in this one, and very compelling views from both of you. Thank you so much to Precious Ajoonu, curriculum design expert and writer, joining us all the way from Nigeria. Ludwekazi Ndlazi is also joining us, a storyteller and creative strategist in South Africa. It's a tricky one. I'm sitting on my bench here. I'm not taking any sides yet, ladies. So thank you so much for a good one.
Thank you for having us. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And may you also join in on the debate on our various social media platforms at Channel Africa 1.